This is a GK Media podcast.
This podcast is part of the GK Media Studios Creators Network, helping people tell their stories. Become a storyteller today and learn about our podcaster network at gkmediastudios.com.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Wellth Talks with myself, Garry Kelly, GK Media, Niall Leyden of Atlantic Wealth Management, and Pádraic Ó Máille of Smácht. And breathe. Pádraic, last week on the show, I was asking you to bring in 3 or 4 books, and you've brought in 4 books, because you're always pulling different nuggets of wisdom from different books. And I'm not a huge book reader, but I listen to audiobooks. So when I'm driving in the car, I generally listen to podcasts or I listen to audiobooks. And a book I just finished yesterday when I was coming back from Longford was Atomic Habits by James Clear, which is just absolutely
it's a Smácht
fantastic.
Favorite.
Oh, it's excellent. So many great nuggets of wisdom in it. But I was thinking as well, for me, what I tend to lean more towards is like stories, like factual stories. So I wouldn't be a big reader of fiction. I actually prefer the cold hard truth. So I love biographies. I love even your Smácht book as well, where you're talking about Riley, and it's all those little lessons in life because they're real, true lessons. So who better to talk to us about books than someone amongst the 3 of us who has actually written books?
3, I might add.
3 books.
3, I might add.
5, actually. But anyway. Yeah. 5.
Pádraic, I read all 5 books, and
You read all 5
and
books.
I only read 3 of them.
Gary private said that.
Yeah. Well, Gary, let me begin with a caveat. Robert Louis Stevenson once said, he said, books are good enough in their own way, but they're a mighty bloodless substitute for life. And I'll begin with that. I wasn't a book reader. What changed, had a significant impact in my life, was about 22 years of age. Last week we discussed the Sabbath, and I was left feeling terrible by you guys with your absolutely sanctified Sundays and nothing compared to me. But I was about 22, and like that, religion was out the window. I was brought up in Catholic Ireland. I was an only kid, and my mother was very, very holy, and it was it was that side of things. The Ó Máilles would say the rosary every single night. 50 Hail Marys. And when you went there as a kid, you had to go through it. I was 22 years of age, and a lovely uncle of mine, Paddy Gleeson, who sadly passed on, he denies it, but he left that book beside my bed. I was about 22, and it was called The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale. And I resented it. I kind of said, Paddy, you're after leaving that there. But I read that book, and it absolutely, one book transformed my life. And what it was a complete antidote to everything I'd been brought up with. Here was a God who was actually a benign God, who was on your side.
Okay,
and I learned that. So the result was I ended up saying a little prayer, simple little prayer from that book called...
See, have you all converted now?
Yeah, we all converted. Well, like I said, I wasn't going to get caught this week, but there was one line out of that is...
Man brought the Bible with him this week.
I can do all things through Christ who strengthened me. And I brought that one comment with me to meetings. I brought it on dates. I brought it literally every sales call I ever did. Now, the result was, whether it was in my head or not, the result was I was more clear, I was more confident, and occasionally I got miraculous results that I wouldn't have got. So that was the first book that had a really powerful impact. Now, my wife says to me, it cost us a fortune because it put me on the road of buying self-help books. And I've been buying them. It's the first thing I do. And any time I go on a holiday, I look for the bookshop and I'll go in and look for psychology books or sales books or business books. So that was Norman Vincent Peale. That was the first big book in my life. Yeah.
Brilliant. An audiobook I found really good when I started out in business in 2013 was I found a collection of recordings of Napoleon Hill giving lectures. I used to listen to these over and over and over again, especially when you're starting out in business. You don't know what you're at. You feel you're the only person at this. It's like what I said last week, the guy I met who said it's a real lonely, like everyone thinks starting off a business is fun and exciting. It can be for the first few days, but it can become very lonely and isolating, and you don't have a clear path yet set out. So you're trying to figure things out. But I found Napoleon Hill was just absolutely fantastic resource for tapping into. He was like my Wellth Talks,
Yeah,
over 10 years ago, where it was all about positive thinking, but just actually knowing what you want and being clear about it, and that acceptance of just letting the universe work its magic and so on. So I used to listen to his recordings over and over and over again, and they were the best source of comfort I had in the early days of setting up in business, when I didn't really know what I was at and if it was going to work out for me or not. So Napoleon Hill as well was a really, really good one for me. What about you, Niall?
Oh, look, I absolutely love. I mean, reading books. At the moment, I'm reading The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. It's by Robin Sharma. But Atomic Habits, for me, I think fundamentally, professionally and personally, had a massive impact. Them small incremental changes. What does it say about 1% every day is 37% better in the year? I mean, whether it's health or wealth or business or life, it's a fabulous book. And I listen to it in the car. I mean, there are so many different goods. The One Thing, Going from Good to Great. Morgan Housel is another fabulous book there around the psychology of money, and he talks much more about the whole behaviours and the difference between being rich and being wealthy. And you know, what is wealth? It's freedom to do what you want, where you want, when you want, with whom you want. And it's much less about spreadsheets and even talking to the children today, and we talk about financial literacy, but books are they're medicine for the mind. Like the odd time we get going to an airport, getting a book and just reading it on the plane, and it's I mean, books are brilliant.
Yeah. Sadly, I only read a book when I go on holidays. It's like, this is my chance where I can get to read or something. And it's funny because a couple of weeks ago they had book week on in primary school. So the little one now this year she's actually really picked up her reading, and she's learning to read now, and she's loving it. So every day she was going to her money box and taking out a tenner to go in and buy a book, and the missus was going crack saying she'll have no money left by the end of the week. And I was like, no, this is great. Like, she is investing in so much more than reading a book. Like, what a book does for you. I mean, it can stay with you for life.
Absolutely.
If you find a great book. So
just on that, Garry, I always remember going to Ballynahinch with my family 1,000 years ago. I remember I arrived down to the bar, and Desi Kenny from the famous book family in Galway, Kenny's, was there with his wife Anne and 3 or 4 of the kids, and they were the kind of teenagers at the time. And I got an awful fright. They were sitting at different sides of the bar in Ballynahinch, and none of them were talking. And Desi barely, and I didn't know Desi very well, he barely looked at me. And I said to Anne, whoa, there's just a serious row in the Kennys. Just let's go straight to the bar and say nothing. Anyway, we were up having a drink, and it came, I always remember, to 7:30, and Desi let a roar, time's up. And all of the Kennys emerged together as a family. And what they did and used to was they would sit for a half an hour and read a different book. And then they would come together as a family and they would review and discuss the various books. I never saw reading on a family agenda, but I thought it was fantastic. I really, really, really did. But that just builds on your point that it's a wonderful way to learn. You can literally become anything with the power of books. That was the Kenny's.
Do you think podcasts? I mean, we're in the car so much. So I look at maybe this week having spent probably 30 hours in the car. It's just
you got to get out of that car, sleeping in it, eating in it.
But you look at the Diary of the CEO, which I'm listening to at the moment, and there's another great author in our business in wealth management and financial planning, Nick Murray, and he wrote a book called Simple and Inevitable Wealth. It's a hardback, classy masterpiece. I mean, he's up there with Warren Buffett. He's just the oracle of financial planning, and he just talks and steps and walks us through, I suppose, what is wealth? Simplicity being the ultimate sophistication, and it being freedom, and it's much less about the numbers and the maths. So I'm probably talking around, our own profession, but, a good book, whether you're listening to it or whether you're reading it, I just think it's, whether COVID has changed things. I mean, during COVID, it was great to read, whereas now I'm finding I'm more and more listening to audiobooks or Kindles or podcasts. I don't know, am I unique in that regard?
No, like, I worked in radio for 13 years, but I'm more drawn to podcasts and audiobooks now. I mean, the reason why I got into podcasting back in 2020 is I loved hearing people's stories. I love hearing how people succeeded. If they failed, how do they kind of come out of that? The life lessons, even with yourselves. Like, every week I'm learning something when we sit around the table on a Friday and record this. So that's what I love. And I think that's maybe a thing about a book. It can be escapism. So for me, an escapism, I get that from watching a movie. If I want knowledge, it's from listening to a podcast, an audiobook. You know, when I get to go on holidays, every so often, I'll try and bring a book with me to get an hour out in the balcony in the evening when everyone's gone to bed to read. Yeah, I think that's what's so good and strong about podcasts nowadays as well, is people are hungry for knowledge. They're hungry for hearing other people's stories, other people's insights. So it's a great way, because we're learning every day until the day we die. So
I'm smiling. Pádraic is an absolute belter there. Eat the Frog. Brian Tracy, whom I saw back in the day, and that's a fabulous book, Pádraic. Eat the Frog.
Yeah, it's one of the, and funny, you talk about podcasts vis-a-vis books. I think both are correct. Some are visual. I'm a visual person. I love to read, and as you look at all my books, they're writing all over them. Others are oral, and they like the audio. And funny, most people say, yeah, Brian, or Niall, that's about 90 pages. Eat that frog for any of your listeners. Really, really powerful. Tracy's, he's a really good writer, very succinct, very much to the point. He's been in Ireland many, many times. The basic premise in Eat That Frog is, and it comes from another Mark Twain comment, that if you do the toughest job first thing in the morning, you know you have started your day well, i.e. eat that frog, eat the next frog. And I think it's absolutely brilliant advice. People could turn their lives around literally now by saying, yeah, I'm going to do the job that I dread or fear or hate the most. Now, the theorists would say, well, you really should be doing the most important job. My experience has been the jobs we tend to put off are the most important, because one, we're sometimes afraid of success. I'm afraid to ring a client because he might say, yeah, I'll go on that course or I'll do that. Or I'm afraid he'll say no. And then I say, I'll wait till after lunch to ring it. Eat That Frog. It's an absolutely superb book. Yeah. Very, very cheap.
And something that James Clear mentions in Atomic Habits is those big things that we're dreading to do. Break them down into a step-by-step process and make it worth doing that. So look, there's loads of things we procrastinate on that we don't want to do, that we know we need to do. But if you can kind of remodel it into easier steps, so it's instead of doing this big thing, you're taking it bit by bit, but also that there's a little win for you, or there's a little perk or bonus. You get something out of kicking it off and doing it step by step.
There's a lovely chapter in that. I don't know which one it is, but it's take it one oil barrel at a time, Garry. And it's exactly your point. That apparently in the desert, when people were crossing the desert, you can only see for about 5 miles up to the horizon. So what they would do is put an oil barrel every 5 miles. So you forgot about crossing the whole desert. All you looked for was the next oil barrel. And I think it's it's like a milestone. I think it's a brilliant thing in life. Okay, let's have our big picture, but then you bring it back to what's the next step on the road to that. So one of the chapters in that, take it one oil barrel at a time.
Brilliant. Now, do you remember when you started out Atlantic Wealth Management last year, was there a book on the locker that you kind of...
Atomic Habits.
Okay.
All day, every day. I mean, it speaks to everything we do in Atlantic Wealth. I mean, you know, in terms of when we look at the clients that we're dealing with, you know, we're helping them to live their best life without running out of money or dying with too much unspent.
Yeah.
So it's the memories, it's the moments. And if you look at what James Clear says around, you know, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. I was with a client there a couple of weeks ago that, you know, very innocuously started saving €1,000 a month. And the only thing... it turned out to be, he's a brilliant friend and a super client, but it's €1,000 a month going into his pension plan, and he was very anti-pensions. But when we had the conversation, he's getting 40% tax relief on his 1,000, which is a 66% return on his investment every month. Now, some might say that's a modest amount. So, and it's mind-blowing, Pádraic. We have a lot of clients come and saying, we want to invest in the new thing. And the new thing very rarely works. I mean, in wealth management and financial planning, it's supposed to be boring, but that €1,000 a month after, I think, 25 or 6 years is north of 850,000.
Wow.
So he hasn't won the lottery. You're looking at Atomic Habits and Morgan Housel talking around the psychology of money. It's that compounding, slow, steady.
Yeah, and that's what James Clear says as well, that as humans, we're naturally drawn to change. We want novelty. We want to change things up. And what happens is when someone is doing really well in business, they want to change things up because they get bored, and then sometimes to make a hames of it. When someone is failing, that's when they want to change, which is a good thing. But if something is working, the ones that are the long-term successes are those who nearly do the most boring type of approach to it, because if it's
systematically
working, keep that system going. Just let it keep ticking away all the time because it's working.
And to add to that, and it's something we talk about in Smácht in our mastermind group, and I see the book here in front of me, I mean, and it works really well in our business. The one thing, I mean, I'd score a 2 out of 10. I'd score a 2 out of 10 on procrastinating. I start lots of things and don't finish them. Whereas, with the team, when we're planning and plotting and looking at our week on a Monday, it's very much around what's going to make this a great week. So when we sit with a client, the first thing we say, if we were to do one thing today, what does good look like? Because very often people are worried or concerned or anxious. We talk about selling, we're solving. As you talked about there last week, we're serving. So, I mean, the one thing, Pádraic, I think is massively important. I think it speaks to, what is really important now, WIN, what's important now. I can't believe I haven't seen that book in that format in a while. You've had that for a while, Pádraic.
I've had that for a while. Just a point on Garry that Niall was making there, and one of our great Smáchties, Kyle McLaughlin, I was asking 1 month, what books are you going to read? And I'm a voracious reader. I could read 2-3 books a week.
Oh.
And Kyle said, hang on a sec, guys. He said, I'm going to read 1 book 3 times this month. And I think it's a little bit like Niall's response to you. It's Atomic Habits over and over and over and over again. I think the great thing is to read and reread and reread those books that really resonate with you at a particular phase in either your business or your life, and go really deep with them. I mean, I think Atomic Habits is one of those. So I think it's a really good thing to identify a few books and read them twice, if not 3 times. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, brilliant. So Niall stole your one thing there.
He did.
Brilliant.
So you want to talk to us about the Jim Rohn book then?
Yeah. That's a very rare book, and I don't know if you can buy it now. You can see it's so old. I had that book with me, and once again,
what's it called?
It's called The 5 Major Pieces to the Life Puzzle. It's an absolutely brilliant book. The key point in it is that neither success nor failure happen overnight. They are not one cataclysmic thing that the economy goes bang and you lose all your money. They're the slow, gradual accumulation, straight out of James Clear, but he was ahead of James Clear. He was before him. And he was saying small, simple disciplines practiced daily. That became the Bible for Smácht. That the initial tagline was, success equals a few simple disciplines practiced daily. Came out of that book. Incidentally, the other great quotation that everyone bandies that came out of that book is, you are the average of the 5 people you are influenced by most of the time. Came out of Jim Rohn. He just had this wonderful way, every single line of that, you can see it there, a few simple disciplines practiced daily.
Wow.
I have it underlined. It's literally, it is lined with gold.
It's like you've written a book in a book.
It's like I've
There's
written a
handwriting all over
yeah.
it.
And you know what the thing about Rowan is? A bit like we spoke a number of weeks ago, you didn't let Niall off the day he wanted to go on the lash in Keynes. Rowan is pretty much the same. He's tough with you. He doesn't let you off the hook. He will tell you that you can have anything in life, but you've got to have the smácht or discipline to actually follow it through. I think it's an absolute, it wouldn't be very popular now because Jim has passed on, but I really recommend it to our listeners.
Brilliant. There you go.
Well, I borrowed that, Pádraic.
No, you will not.
Try and read those other 2 books first now.
And did you write a book?
Well, that's it from this week's book club of Wellth Talks. But no, thanks a million for sharing the books that have made a difference in your lives. Look, honestly, would encourage anyone to pick up a book, whether it's just for escapism or it's a self-help book or it's an audiobook or whatever. But I think you'll always get benefit from them. You just have to make the time for yourself to do it, but it's worth it. And a great book, as I said, can stay with you for life. Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Wellth Talks. Spread the word, spread the news, send us your reviews, send us your comments, share it with friends and colleagues, and we'll talk to you again next Friday. Thank you.
This is a GK Media podcast.